Morning. So today's the 1st of May, and I think this is the first time I'm making a video at the beginning of the month and not a few days in. So for those of you who are, if there is anybody who's watching these videos, I haven't really marketed them out to anyone yet, so I don't think there's anyone watching. I forgot to load March's wrap up and April's to be read. When I actually recorded, I forgot to edit it. I was a bit lazy this month, as you'll see as I go through my wrap for April. And so that video is going to be uploaded before this one. And so you will also have fresh in your mind that I have this huge list of to-be-reads that I did not get to. I thought because it was a super long weekend for Easter that I would get a lot of reading done. And these are 3 books that I also thought, so it was these 3 books plus this book from our book club that made it 4. And then there was another book. Oh, there was Radical Candor and let me just go get that Radical Candor because that's one of my TV reads. Radical Candor, apologies for moving away. Oh, great. And Descendants of the Crane, which I actually did get on. It was meant to be released on the 8th of April, but I think there was a bit of a delay, so I only downloaded on the 10th of April. Not that it made a difference because I didn't really read it. So if you're counting, that's 4, 5, 6 books that I was meant to have read, physical books plus a digital copy. Actual to be read ended up being only 4. So just a quick reminder of my 3 reading challenges. Sorry, that's my cat, Misty. She's literally outside. I don't know how. She's got like a 6th sense for when I'm on the phone. How she picked it up. Because like the window's not open, the sliding door in my room is open, but in the lounge, nothing. But somehow she knew. I'm recording something, I'm on the phone. She's there like a bear. Anyways, so just to remind you again, I'm doing 3 reading challenges this year. The first one is the Goodreads challenge, where I want to read 60 books, which averages out to about 5 books a month. In January and February, I averaged at 6 books a month, so I was ahead of where I needed to be by 2 books. In March, I read 5, so I was still at the 2 books ahead. And in April, I only read 4, so I'm down to 1 book ahead of where I need to be. But this is still a reminder that this is so much better than where I was last year this time. Last year, my challenge was 50 books. This time last year, I had only read 4. And so in the months from October to December, I literally read about 30-something books. It was insane. So I don't want to get there, and I don't think I will, because I'm at 33% at this point in time, having read 21 books out of 60. The second challenge is to read 12 African authors who are from the continent. So last year I read a lot more African lit, but it ended up being a lot of Africans in diaspora books, and in particular Nnedi Okorafor. So she is Nigerian American, but she's American. At the end of the day, I want to read books that are written by people who are based here. Because I myself, as you know, am attempting to write so many different books, and I am an African on the continent, and so I want to understand what it's like, what other authors on the continent write like. I read a lot of what other authors around the world write like. Just in terms of influence, in terms of understanding what I don't want to do and what I do want to do, etc. Then the third challenge is, I think it's called Yark 2019. It was started by a book blogger, she's a blogger, not a blogger, that I follow. And her and a couple of other, book bloggers started it. It's the Year of Asian Reading Challenge, Yark. And so I've joined them, but I have kept it just as simple as reading African authors. It's also, I want to read 12 books written by Asians, and they're not specific about where the Asians need to be based. It's Asians in Asia or Asian Americans or whatever. So that's what I need to do. So at this point in time, I'm at 21 books for the Goodreads challenge. In terms of Africans in Africa, I'm at 4 out of 12. So I've read, I think I'm at 4. I need to count that again. I think I'm at 4. And then for the Yark challenge, I'm behind. I'm only at 2. And it's the same author, Julia C. Dow. I read her series, A Forest of a Thousand Lanterns series, just a retelling of Snow White and the Evil Queen from an Asian perspective, which is a brilliant, brilliant book. So Descent of the Crane was meant to have been finished by me in April, as well as another book that I'm reading on my Kindle. I keep forgetting about it, which is about skincare. And I'm 60% in, so it's not going to be hard for me to finish it, but I always forget. That would get me caught up. But now it's May, so I am 3 books behind from that challenge. And so the others I'm on par. Right, so in terms of what I read this month, or the past month, because now we're in May, in April, out of the 6-7 books that I had identified, and I really thought I was going to read 3 of them in the Easter weekend, I read jack shit that weekend. Just drank a lot. Anyways, I read 4 books. Only one of them, Eusebius Mackays's book, was in my to-be-read plan. The other 3 were audiobooks, and they were books that I just came across. So I'm going to talk about the audiobooks first, and then we'll get into Eusebius's book. So the first book that I read was Neil Gaiman's The Graveyard Book, or the first book that I listened to. Oh, and just for those who are new to my channel, the 3 formats that I consume books in is audiobooks from Audible in particular. I do not get any sponsorship from Audible. I just really do enjoy that platform. Kindle books, the digital ones in terms of Kindle, and then physical books like this, or these. I tend to obviously finish the audiobooks a lot faster, and that's honestly how I've gotten to finish 50 books last year. But even last year, in December in particular, I did read a lot of physical books. Some of them were physical like this, and some of them were the digital Kindle ones like Harry Potter, etc. So, but I think my total ended up being like 60% audiobooks and 40% digital and physical. So this year I said, let's make it 50-50. And this month was meant to be just physical books, or physical plus 1 digital, and I failed at that because it was 3 audiobooks and 1 physical book. So I'm trying to improve on. I get distracted so easily when I'm reading physical books. I don't know why, but I'm trying to work on it. Right, so Neil Gaiman, I was listening to the Tim Ferriss Show. It's a podcast by Tim Ferriss, who is also an author of a variety of books. I know I've got his book in here. Oh, it's up at the top. Tools of Titan. A bit far for me to grab it. Maybe I'll grab it. I have 2 of them. I don't know what the other one is. So the reason I have 2 is I ordered one from the Book Depository. What the hell is it? I'm a little concerned that I can't find it. But anyways, I'll figure it out. So I ordered one of them, the hardcover one, the one I can't find, from the Book Depository. And because it was cheaper than the ones in South Africa, because this one was 348 rands. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to spend all that money. I think I could get it for 200 and something. It was hardcover. Thought, but there's this big book. I read the sample on Kindle, and I was like, okay, I want this book. And I decided I didn't want to get a Kindle version because my Kindle is absolutely destroyed. It's somewhere in there. I think I showed it in one of my videos. It's destroyed. But I was like, I want the physical book, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff in here about diets and all of these things. And then, investments, life hacks, all sorts of really great stuff from his podcasts. And I ordered the hardcover, and it was taking forever to get here. And one day I was in Exclusive Books in Hyde Park. It's a beautiful, beautiful bookstore. It used to be my favorite bookstore until I went to the one in Sandton City. It's a new one. That one's my new favorite one. I don't go there often enough, but oh my God, it's beautiful. And then I also really like the Book Lounge in Cape Town. I think It's very quaint and cozy, but I really do like that in terms of South African book stores. So, I ended up having 2 of them. And one of them was meant to be given away as a gift to a friend of mine. And I didn't give it to him, I don't think. Oh, shit, I did give it away. Not bad. I gave away the hard, so ironically, I worked so hard, waited so long for the hardcover, because I thought I prefer paperbacks. When people ask, do you prefer paperbacks over hardbacks? I don't like hardback books. I find them very difficult to hold when you're reading. So clunky. I've got a couple of hardcovers over here. So this was given to me, the hardcover. I finished it, I read it. I prefer paperbacks. My personal thing. And so that's why it was weird for me to then have ordered a book from the book depository in the UK that is hardcovered, because I thought this book is so huge that I don't think it will last long if it doesn't have a hardcover protecting it. But I haven't really finished this book, so that's probably why it also still looks good. Anyway, so Tim Ferriss, the author of that book, has a podcast called The Tim Ferriss Show, where he interviews a whole bunch of people who do a lot of things, etc. And he interviewed Neil Gaiman. Now, I'd heard about Neil Gaiman, this author of American Gods. I think it was the only thing I knew that he had done, and a couple of other things apparently. But I was like, I don't think he's my type or my style, so I didn't bother trying. Because I tried to watch American Gods, the series, and I just couldn't get into it. So I was like, Then I listened to him on the Tim Ferriss Show, and he was phenomenal. He gave me so many tips as a writer on how to write better. And Tim Ferriss went on about his most favorite audiobook to listen to was The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. I also was so surprised to find out that he wrote Stardust, which I love that movie. Coraline loved that movie. And a bunch of other things that he'd also done graphic novels. I was like, oh, this guy's actually pretty brilliant. And I loved the tips that he gave. So I said, let me give him a shot. So I said, let me start with an audiobook, because Tim Ferriss says the audiobook of Graveyard Book is brilliant. So I'm like, I'm not going to buy the physical book. I'm going to listen to it. And it was phenomenal. Give it 6 halos. Absolutely phenomenal. Neil Gaiman narrates it, and he uses all sorts of accents and voice tones, and he was brilliant. Like, you could tell I built in my own head what that world looked like. When I see the image of what the cover is meant to look like for the Graveyard Book, my image of the story is nothing like it, but I loved how he's writing so simple, but yet so descriptive, and it really draws you in. I think there was like 2 or 3 different plots happening in this book, surrounded around this young boy or young baby that ends up being raised in a graveyard, and he's raised by ghosts. And it sounds so implausible, but as you read it, it seems so plausible. And then there's all this other supernatural stuff that comes up in this way and comes up in that way, from the human world and from the ghost world. And he does it in such a way that I didn't see it coming. And I should have, right? Because I've watched Coraline, I've watched Stardust, and these are fictional books with supernatural powers and stuff. But the way it was written it just seemed really normal. Like, it's not otherly. I love J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling is one of my favorites, as you can say. I've got the Deathly Hallows. This is the only one I actually physically bought. My older sister Rachel had bought the other 6 or 5 the other 6. No, 5 for my sisters, and I just read those ones. But I've got on my Kindle the complete one, and so in December I read book 1 and 2 again, and then probably again in December I'll read another 2 versions, another 2, 3 and 4, etc. And just reread these books again, because she just writes so well. But even though she writes so well, her world that she created was other, right? It was a separate world to the human world. He writes, or at least in this book, in the Graveyard Book, we are in this world, I'm in this world, and this shit is happening in this world to normal people. Like, this boy he's not special. He's just a little boy who, I'm going to give away a little bit of the plot, who is about to be, his family's been murdered, and by pure luck happens to follow some kind of light, happens to walk away from he's a young toddler, right? Walk away from the house when this murderer has come and killed his parents and his sister and was about to kill him when he's disappeared. His house happens to be around the corner from the cemetery, so he ends up in the cemetery, and then his mom's ghost rushes to the ghost, like from out of pure love, rushes to a ghost that comes across her son and says, protect him. And he is. And it kind of reminds me of what happened to Harry Potter. You know, in the beginning of Harry Potter, where he's protected by his mom's love. It reminds me of that, but it's like different, because this is about a boy being raised in a ghost. I was going to say ghost town, but being raised in a cemetery by ghosts. And just how that could become so plausible, and then the things that he has to go through as he grows, and he has to interact with humans, because he's still human at the end of the day, and some of the ghostly powers that he can learn, but he can't learn too many of them because he's obviously not a ghost, and just the ghost realm and what happens in the ghost realm, what happens in the human realm with supernatural stuff, and what happens just when a boy who is not really supernatural, but kind of has become one because he's been raised by ghosts, just life and everything that happens around it. And it was such a brilliant book. And I know I sound like I'm not making any sense. It's just I don't want to give away too much of this book, because I just believe everybody should read it or listen to it. It's so brilliantly narrated by Neil Gaiman that I think I finished it in a lot faster time than I was meant to, because there's times when I would go to the gym and listen to it, or I'd come home and listen to it in my room. I usually listen to books just when I'm driving. This book I wanted to finish. I needed to know what's happening next, what's going to happen next. Then the next book that I ended up listening to was Coraline by Neil Gaiman. I had watched that movie several times and loved it. And when I found out from the podcast that he also wrote it, I was like, oh my God, I had no clue how brilliant this guy was. And so I so enjoyed The Graveyard Book that I was like, I wasn't ready to not listen to him anymore. So I got Coraline. And this one only gets 5 halos, and the only reason it gets 5 halos instead of 6 like The Graveyard Book is because I had watched Coraline before, and so the world that he was creating was already created in my head because I'd seen it. I think his name's Tim Burton's version of it. And I already knew what the plot of the story was, etc., but I loved it. It was also very gripping, narrated as well by Neil Gaiman. He's just such a brilliantly talented person. It's a brilliantly written book, brilliantly narrated book by Neil Gaiman, and that's why it gets 5 halos. I was thoroughly entertained by it. And even though I'd watched the movie, I still got, like, what's going to happen next? Or, oh my God, is she going to survive it? Even though I knew, because I'd watched it, I knew how it kind of ends. I hadn't watched it in maybe 5, 6, maybe longer years, but which is why I can't remember some of the characters in it. But it was still an entertaining book. And that's why it gets 5 halos. Right. So then book number 3 is Akala's book, Natives, which is a book on class and race in the ruin of the empire. So talking about racism and classism as a Black British man, but also about Britain's role in how society, the globe, has been shaped around classism and racism. So this book was suggested to me by a very good friend of mine, Sonia. She's like, get this audiobook. She didn't even say get the physical book. She just said get the audio. And I'm glad I did. So I got it, but when I saw it, because I love Akala. I don't know if you know who Akala is. So he's a rap artist. I haven't really listened to his music, so I don't know his music, but I follow him on Instagram and Facebook, and I got to know him because there were a couple of videos of him debunking racism, or talking about racism in England in a variety of talk shows, and doing it in such an educated, calm way because when I talk about it, I get so emotional that you could just see me being emotional, and I cannot tell you what I'm trying to tell you or to explain to you in an unemotional way. And so people just kind of say, you're just being emotional, you're being sensitive. And he just had a way of talking about these things with fact and a sense of serenity and calmness. And it was actually the white people that he was, having these discussions with who were getting all emotional. It's like, it was like a flip of the script. And so that's how I got to know him. Other people who might not know or, can't remember his videos, his sister is Miss Dynamite. She's a pretty famous rap artist herself. So I got this book in March, but I saw the title and I was like, this seems a little bit too deep and serious for me. I'm not going to listen to it. And after I finished Neil Gaiman's book, so I had really started this book before, and I was busy reading it in my spare time when I got home and I wasn't feeling tired on weekends, etc. At night. So in the mornings I go to the gym, so it would have to be at night or weekends that I'd read. And I was like, I could listen to a podcast, or I could listen to a book. And I went on and I was trying to look at the books that I had, and my credits were finished for the month. So I was like, actually they weren't finished. I had one more credit. I don't know why I didn't think of getting another. Oh, I was still, in deciding. I think it was just before I was about to get into the car and drive to work. And I was like, the effort of trying to find a book now, I'm late for work. Well, not late, but I was late to leave. And when I really got this book, so I was like, let me just listen to it. And I'm so glad I did. It was so brilliant. So I'm going to talk about Akala's book and Eusebius's book because they're very similar in their concept. So Akala's book was written last year, I think, 2018, 2017. And Eusebius's Ubuntu in My Bathroom was written, I think, in 2012. This one says it was published in 2013. Now, I have to admit that when I read it, 2012, sorry. When I read it initially, even though I knew that, I had a feeling that this was probably his first book, this is not his latest book. This was the book he said brought, when our book club founders approached him and asked him to come through, this is the book he wanted us to read, which I find really interesting because he does have a couple of other books. I think there's Why I'm Not Going to Vote for the DA, and I can't remember what the other books are called. And it's really weird that I'm so used to other authors, more international ones, always put all of their books in here, especially because this was republished in 2018, right? So you really could have put down the rest of his books here, but anyways. So in essence, these two books are kind of half a memoir about Akala or Eusebius's life, and then also just discussions on society. So Akala's is mainly, and he's very specific, race and class and his life. And Eusebius's is on race, class, sexuality, and culture. I think those are the ways that he split it up. He split it up into race, sexuality, and culture is how he split his. And his was set up as essays, whereas Akala did not say his was essays. In essence, it was a story. It was a full-on book. And he'd have chapters that go through the book. With Eusebius, there were essays that he'd written. And I guess some of them were written for opinion pieces, right, etc. And he's just kind of put a collection of them together. So an anthology. I'm going to admit that I'm not a huge fan of South African nonfiction. The books that I have read recently, so like Malebu's Sephodi's book that I read last time, Misbehave, Kaya Lange's book. I think my mom took that one. I can't remember what it's called now. His latest book. I Write What I Like was okay for anthology. It was okay. But I tend to find that I prefer anthologies that are internationally written. And I think the reason I do is there seems to be a little bit of more structure in how those, even though you might have just small little stories, it has an opening, a beginning, and a close. And even though his essays are kind of structured that way, and a lot of these other books kind of are, for the most part, there's no golden thread. And a lady from my book club made mention of this in her review of Misbehave, was that it just felt like reading her journal. And that's what a lot of South African non-fiction books, especially when they're based on anthologies or whatever, when it's not about specific topics like how to invest better, or those type of things, when it's about race or politics or etc. My view on the world from these different things that impact it, it just tends to feel like a little bit of waffling, a little bit of no real structure, format, and then no real golden thread between the three. So he's attempted to do that by having it separated into those three categories of race, sexuality, and culture. And I really must admit, I really enjoyed how he would set them up. I'm just going to show you quickly. He would set it up like this. So it could be like race. So this section is about race, and then he starts it off and he has a heading. You can see this heading, like a bunch in my bathroom, and he has the three questions that he's going to discuss, right? So he is an academic. He says it quite clearly in his introduction. And in fact, his introduction for me made me excited about this book. I said, oh, Lord, hallelujah, I finally found someone who can write fiction in South African way. I enjoy it. The introduction, where he basically explained how he wants to kind of be the middle between academics who use very convoluted language and, other writers who use things to make things too simple, right? He believes that South Africans in general should have access to all this information, that academics constantly debate about, which they don't really disseminate. But at the same time, we shouldn't make it too simple because we don't allow for the complexities to come through. And I was excited by this. I was also excited because his foreword was written by Jonathan Jansen. I'm not a fan of Jonathan Jansen for a lot of reasons that I'm not going to get into here, but I was so impressed that he allowed this to be included in his book, where it's very clear that Jonathan Jansen isn't necessarily a fan of this book. But Jonathan does say that, one of the things he says is that Eusebius is a person who doesn't beat around the bush. He basically gets straight to what he's trying to say, and he thinks more South Africans should be like that, and he really enjoys that. But having said that, there's a lot of things that he said that I didn't agree with, a lot of things that a lot of people are not going to agree with, but also there's an element of not tolerating other people's opinions. And I thought that was brilliant that Eusebius obviously read this forward and still put it in his book. And I was like, wow, that is very mature. And I'm like, I'm so excited for this book. And I really got into it until, I got into it, and I liked how he got to Ubuntu in my bathroom. It was funny. Like he can be very funny. It was very funny. But it seemed a little bit contrite, some of it, because he'd be like, people say, they said, callers came in, and you kind of, I don't know, I feel that perhaps if he had rather said a potential argument to this would be da 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 da. This is what I agree about it because of da da da. This is why I disagree with it because of da da da. And he attempted to do that, but it just didn't quite land for me. But the moment it really became an issue for me was when I got to this. Oh no, where is it now? This essay. There he goes. Heard the one about blacks who can't be racist? And so already, it's all gone that he's going to say blacks can be racist, right? His questions are, can you be a racist if you don't have economic power? Does our understanding of racism have to be rooted in history? Isn't it insulting to say blacks can't be racist? Already, those three arguments are problematic. He then also defines racism incorrectly in here. I have to find it because at this book club, I'm going to have to tell him all of this. So I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to bring it up. In his definition, he basically defines prejudice and bigotry. Even in his argument, he says the people who say that black people can't be racist are in essence saying that black people are perfect. And that is not true, right? And you always think to yourself, did he actually ever engage with someone who has said why black people can't be racist? Because if he did, I used to be someone who used to think black people could be racist until I engaged with someone who explained it to me. And I realized why black people can't be racist. The person was never saying black people can't be prejudiced or bigoted, because as human beings, we're all prejudiced and bigoted. But when we say they can't be racist, we're talking about the system of racism and how entrenched and deep it is. And when he defines racism as being discriminating against someone because of the color of their skin, that's prejudice and bigotry. Racism is when you deem someone inferior to you because they are black, or you deem yourself to be superior because you are white. No other way around it. In the definition, they don't say that. They just say you deem yourself to be superior to someone because of your race, or you deem someone to be inferior to you because of their race. In the basic Oxford Dictionary definition. But if you look at racism, and this is why I want to talk about Akala, when he goes into it, he goes in and he explains where the concept of racism came from. And it came only in the 18th century, and it was a system that was specifically built. So before that, human beings were fucking horrible to each other, but they were horrible to you based on your class, your standing in society. So your color of your skin did not matter. And then one day, it came upon, in particular in Europe, where they wanted to discriminate against a group of people, the Jews, who did look like them, and you could pick them out because they would wear, if they were uber religious, they'd have, I don't know what the hat thing is that they'd wear, and women who were very religious, very similar to Muslims, cover up themselves, or actually even very religious Christian women, and so you could pick them out, and maybe their names or whatever, very arbitrary reasons that you kind of determine, is that person Jewish or not? To the point where, even in the Holocaust, they had to put the stars on to identify them because you could walk past them and not pick them out. But yet, this was where racism stemmed from, Jewish people. So it wasn't initially about race or color. It was initially about trying to take a group of people and tell them they are inferior so that you can abuse them. In England, it started with the Irish. And for a very long time, whites were excluded. Irish were excluded from being white. Spanish were not white. Italians were not white. Jews were not white. They are now defined as being white, recently, because, and it's even why white supremacists still are anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic. And I guess the reason they were now is because they expanded that definition to basically say, if your skin is darker than mine, which, Spanish and Italians tend to be darker than more Scandinavian type skin, or Germanic type skin, or Caucasian skin, right? That's why you have Caucasian, you have Mediterranean, you have Semite, right? And when it expanded to global slavery and colonizing Asians, Latin America, and then eventually Africa, it started to become about physical features. And that's where the racism came from. But beyond just how in depth and the layers and how many years it took, because he says it will be about rooted in history. It's yes, because that's, in essence, it's not about economic power, because if it was, Oprah Winfrey would not have been discriminated against in Switzerland. one of the richest women in the world, was discriminated against because she was Black in Switzerland by somebody who, or in a shop that Oprah could buy 1,000, maybe even 1,000,000 times over. It's not about just straight up bigotry and prejudice, because it's so specific in terms of dehumanizing a specific group of people that they had zoos for Black people. They experimented on Black people. They had genocide, killing, and then they just enslaved them for free, cheap labor. And so when you say Black people can be racist, you completely diminish how devastating the system of racism was in terms of how it was built, but also to this day. When I lived in South Korea, I had people come and have all sorts of assumptions about me when they found out, well, when they look at me, but also when they found out I'm African. All sorts. One of them was that I must be a prostitute to be able to make it here in South Korea. The other was that, how did I know how to sing happy birthday in Africa? Do we celebrate birthday? The other was, where did you get your clothes from? Did you buy them here in South Korea? And I was like, no, every single clothes. I remember my students were asking me, I was like, everything I'm wearing today, I came from South Africa with this. Like, I even said to them, just go and Google, go check out videos. You can see we wear clothes. We wore clothes even in the past. Like the fact that even some Black people would be like, why are you so anti-white people? We wouldn't have had clothes without them. I was like, I don't know about you, but I know my ethnic group, we wore clothes. This concept that we would run around in loincloths. Other ethnic groups that did that, yeah, but it was more out of, because they were in the desert and it was hot, and it was about convenience and comfortability as you hunt more than I didn't know that I was naked. Yeah, type Bible mentality. So that was one of my biggest issues with this book. But the other issue with it was that it just felt very surface level. Very surface level in terms of when he addressed a lot of the things that he addressed. Whereas with Akala, he got into the depth of it. I don't know what the physical book looked like in terms of size, in terms of the audiobook. It wasn't very long. It took me a week to listen to it. And listen to it every day, like in the morning on the way to work and in the evening on the way back from work. So I think it might have been 13 hours, I'm not sure. But it was such an engaging book, and I didn't feel like whatever he spoke about was ever repetitive, because he really got into it really deep. From his own perspective of being of mixed race, of being around white family, of being around Black family, of being identified as Black, of the nuances of culture from the perspective of Black British who are of Caribbean descent, Black British who are of West African descent. There are East Africans, but he specifically was talking about West Africans. I guess the large majority of Black British from African descent are West Africans. African Americans, Africans in the Caribbean, Africans on the African continent, and how we interact with each other, what we can do, what we can't do, how we relate and how we don't. Talking about apartheid system, slavery in the US, the transatlantic slave trade, slavery and racism in the UK. Talking about his own personal experiences in schools, about the system that, because he did come from a poor family, but he's in essence poor Black and poor white family, right? So he wasn't poor because he was Black, but he was poor or from a working class and happened to be Black. And what working just classism and how it works in the UK, talking about how the system works to firstly diminish the working class, but then diminish even more working class people of color. So he also touched on British Asians experiences as well. And I thought that it was just so well researched, so well written. It gets 5 halos for me because It made me understand just how deep this whole racism thing and classism thing is. It made me understand where the violence comes from in the working class space. And I wondered about, from a South African perspective, but also the rest of the continent perspective, it made me think about a lot of things. I learned a lot from him. And it also made me consider things like, I never used to say the word nigger. And now I do all the time because of movies and music videos and everything. And when he speaks about it, it's not even from a space that's making me feel guilty about having now that I do say it, but rather having me question why I feel comfortable saying it. And not from the perspective of, oh, own it, but more from the perspective of, as an African raised in Africa, and even though South Africa has a lot of similarities to America, the truth is we have our hate word and we don't say it to each other for a reason. And even the person who made it popular to say it, Richard Pryor, after he visited a couple of countries in Africa, and he realized that Africans don't view themselves to be inferior, with the exception of South Africa, of course, or countries that still have a bit of colonization or post-colonization racism, which is also fair. Like, I would go, whenever I visit other African countries, you can see and feel, and for a very long time, because my parents were born and raised in other African countries, I wasn't raised to believe myself to be inferior. It's something that I learned living in South Africa. And I think that's something that, a nuance that is missing from a Bantu in my bathroom, that he attempts to talk about it, he attempts to do all that stuff. But I give it 3 halos because this is a book that, had he gone a little bit deeper, had he done what Akala has done, and I know it's unfair because this was written in 2012 and Akala was written in 2017 or 2018. In this book, it literally says here, there's a 5th impression that was done in 2018. So he could have reviewed it, updated it, upgraded it, and he didn't feel the need to. So that also tells me that it's not his style. And I think it's a lot of South African nonfiction authors' style is not to really delve deep, and we really just do surface level stuff. And I don't know if it's because we're scared of challenging this Rainbow Nation, even though he says, yeah, Rainbow Nation doesn't exist, which, I mean, it never did. And he says he doesn't understand why we need it to exist. But yet he doesn't go as deep as he needs to, as deep as Akala did, and does a disservice for us. So I was considering giving this book to a good friend of mine. She's read a lot of books about race from an American perspective, and I thought, read this one from a South African. But as I read, I was like, it's going to do us as Black people a disservice because he doesn't go deep enough. It's very shallow. And so that's why I guess 3 halos. Anyway, so that was a very long review for just 4 books. So I'm on 21 books. So Eusebius is my 4th African in Africa book. And my 21st book for the Goodreads Challenge. I did not finish any Asian books this month. So yeah, that's quite a long video, longer than I thought it would be. But if you have read any of the books that I've mentioned today, whether it's the books that I've read in April, the books I'm hopefully going to read in May, please write a review about them. Let me know what you think. Also, give me some suggestions for books. I need Asian authored books to get through to 12, and just any interesting new books. Like, I've got a book club that helps me guarantee that I'm going to read at least 1 book a month. But I also have a sea of books here that I have not read. But I'm always interested in, I've forgotten what the Japanese term is, of someone who just constantly buys books and never reads them. That's in essence what I am. Anyways, have a great workers' day if you have a day off, or Labor Day, I think the rest of the world calls it. I think the whole world is off today. Have a good public holiday. And I'll see you at the end of the month. Also, check me out on My blog, I'll put a link to it. I haven't really written any posts since March, but I'm going to do some this weekend. Yeah, I've been very, very, very lax on my blogging, but I'm going to write some posts on Friday night. I don't have any plans. I've got book club on Saturday. So, and if I don't get drunk like I did last time, I should be able to write some posts on Saturday afternoon, and then certainly, Saturday evening, and then certainly Sunday as well. All right, cheers.